Did you know Italy banned over 24 of its own war films in the 1960s? Or that one director actually received death threats after portraying Italian soldiers as cowards? Welcome to the dark underbelly of Italian war cinema, where filmmakers risked everything to expose their nation's complicated relationship with fascism, resistance, and moral collapse during history's deadliest conflict. Number 15. Rome. Open City, 1945. Roberto Rossellini shocked the world by filming this raw masterpiece while bombs were still falling. Shot in the actual rubble of Rome just weeks after Allied liberation, this film used real citizens instead of actors, many still traumatized from Nazi occupation. The crew literally stole film stock from German storage facilities and worked with makeshift equipment powered by car batteries since electricity was still unreliable. What makes this film legendary isn't just its gritty realism, but how it dared to show Italian collaborators working alongside Nazis. One horrifying torture scene where Gestapo agents use blowtorches on resistance fighters was so realistic that audience members fainted during early screenings. Vatican officials tried blocking its release, claiming the film would reopen national wounds too soon. Critics initially called it amateur propaganda. But Rome, Open City, went on to revolutionize cinema worldwide, launching Italian neorealism and inspiring everyone from Scorsese to Spielberg. The film's most famous scene, a pregnant woman being gunned down in the street, was based on an actual incident the director witnessed firsthand. Despite winning the Grand Prize at Cannes in 1946, the film remained heavily censored in parts of Europe for decades. As one American critic wrote, "This isn't just a movie about war, it's a genuine act of resistance captured on celluloid." Number 14. Salò, or The 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. Pier Pasolini's final film before his murder remains the most banned Italian movie in history. Set in Mussolini's puppet state of Salò, this nightmarish vision depicts fascist leaders kidnapping teenagers and subjecting them to unspeakable degradation as a metaphor for political corruption. So controversial was this film that Italian authorities seized all prints immediately after Pasolini's death in 1975. The production itself was plagued with problems. Multiple actors quit midway through filming, claiming psychological distress. Pasolini received daily death threats, and many believe his brutal murder shortly after completing the film was connected to its politically explosive content rather than the official story involving a hustler. When finally screened at Berlin Film Festival, several critics walked out, while others declared it the most important anti-fascist statement in cinema history. The film remained banned in Italy until 1977, Australia until 1993, and parts of the UK until 2000. What makes Salò uniquely devastating is how it connects Italy's fascist past to its corrupt present. Pasolini deliberately cast innocent-looking teenagers to represent the country's exploited youth, creating uncomfortable parallels that politicians desperately tried to suppress. As Martin Scorsese later noted, "It's not a film you watch, it's a film that watches you, judging how much horror you can stomach in pursuit of understanding power." Number 13. The Night Porter, 1974. Liliana Cavani ignited a firestorm with this twisted tale of a former SS officer who reunites with a concentration camp survivor he abused, rekindling their sadomasochistic relationship. Italian censors initially banned it outright, calling it morally repugnant exploitation of Holocaust suffering. The film's most controversial scene shows Charlotte Rampling dancing topless in SS cap for Nazi officers, a sequence Italian authorities cut completely, claiming it eroticized fascism. When Cavani restored it, she received such violent threats that she temporarily fled Italy. Critics savaged the film, with Italian newspaper Il Messaggero calling it psychological pornography masquerading as historical drama. Yet Cavani defended her work, explored how trauma victims sometimes form twisted bonds with oppressors, a psychological phenomenon Italy wasn't ready to confront about its own fascist past. Behind the scenes, tensions flared between Rampling and co-star Dirk Bogarde, who reportedly told her, "This film will destroy both our careers." Despite its $800,000 budget, The Night Porter grossed over $15 million worldwide, becoming an underground sensation precisely because of attempts to suppress it. The film's lasting controversy stems from blurring lines between exploitation and art. Bernardo Bertolucci later admitted, "Cavani did something remarkable. She forced Italians to confront the uncomfortable reality that some victims became complicit with fascism not because they were evil, but because trauma destroys normal moral boundaries." Number 12. General della Rovere, 1959. Roberto Rossellini's comeback film sparked outrage by portraying an Italian con man who impersonates a resistance hero in Nazi-occupied Italy. Based on a true story, it showed Italy's resistance in an unflattering light, suggesting many heroes were opportunists or accidental martyrs rather than ideological warriors. The film's release coincided with Italy's economic boom, when many wanted to forget wartime collaboration rather than examine it. Veterans groups protested screenings, claiming Rossellini was smearing genuine sacrifice. What made critics especially uncomfortable was how charming Vittorio De Sica made the protagonist, forcing audiences to identify with a morally compromised character. The most controversial scene shows Italian citizens enthusiastically welcoming German troops, directly contradicting the post-war myth that all Italians secretly opposed fascism. This sequence was actually cut from Italian theatrical releases until 1972. Despite winning the Golden Lion at Venice Film Festival, the film faced distribution problems across Italy. Several theaters refused to show it after receiving threats, and Rossellini later revealed government officials pressured him to add a more patriotic ending, which he refused. Film historian Peter Bondinella noted, "General della Rovere was revolutionary precisely because it suggested Italian redemption came not through heroic resistance, but through ordinary people stumbling into moral choices they weren't prepared for." The film's complex moral ambiguity made it too uncomfortable for 1950s Italy, but secured its reputation as one of cinema's most honest portrayals of wartime moral compromise. Number 11. Two Women, 1960. Vittorio De Sica's brutal masterpiece featuring Sophia Loren as a mother trying to protect her daughter during Allied liberation sparked national outrage. The film's centerpiece, showing mother and daughter being gang-raped by Moroccan troops fighting alongside Americans, shattered Italy's sanitized vision of its liberation. What made this sequence particularly explosive was that it was based on actual events during the Moroccan crimes of 1944, when Allied-affiliated colonial troops assaulted thousands of Italian civilians. These attacks remained an unspoken national trauma, and De Sica was accused of anti-American propaganda for depicting them. Loren fought fiercely for the role against studio wishes, even accepting minimal payment. Her raw performance earned her an Oscar, making her the first actor to win for a non-English role. Yet in Italy, politicians condemned her for bringing shame to Italian women. While American distributors initially refused to include the rape scene, claiming audiences weren't ready for such realism, critics were equally divided. While some praised the film's unflinching honesty, conservative reviewer Oriana Falassi infamously wrote that De Sica had prostituted Italian suffering for international shock value. The film faced censorship challenges in various regions of Italy, with some theaters receiving bomb threats. De Sica later revealed, "I wanted to destroy the myth that only Nazis committed atrocities. War makes monsters of everyone, including liberators. Italy needed this uncomfortable truth." The film grossed over $10 million worldwide, despite attempts to suppress it. Number 10. The 4 Days of Naples, 1962. Nanny Loy's explosive recreation of the 1943 Naples uprising against Nazi occupation created immediate political turmoil. Shot on the actual streets where fighting occurred, Loy recruited real participants as extras, many of whom began suffering PTSD symptoms during filming. What made this film truly controversial was its focus on working-class resistance rather than military actions. It showed children and women fighting alongside men, contradicting the masculine heroism narrative preferred by Italian authorities. One sequence depicting a 10-year-old boy throwing grenades was so disturbing that censors demanded its removal, claiming it glorified child soldiers. The film's most shocking aspect was revealing that many Neapolitans initially collaborated with Germans before turning against them, suggesting resistance came from pragmatism rather than ideological purity. This nuance infuriated politicians who preferred simpler narratives about Italian heroism. Despite being nominated for an Oscar, the film faced distribution problems in northern Italy, where audiences rejected its portrayal of southern Italians as the nation's true resistance fighters. Theaters in Milan reported multiple protests during screenings. Critics recognized its brilliance, with legendary reviewer Pauline Kael calling it the most honest European war film ever made. Director Loy received death threats from neo-fascist groups, prompting armed guards at the film's premiere. Years later, Martin Scorsese credited the film's street-fighting sequences as direct inspiration for Gangs of New York, noting, "Loy showed that urban warfare is chaotic, dirty, and fought by ordinary people pushed to extraordinary actions." Number 9. Kapo, 1960. Gillo Pontecorvo created international uproar with this unsparing look at a Jewish girl who becomes a concentration camp guard to survive. Italian censors initially rejected the film entirely, claiming it defamed Holocaust victims by showing their moral compromise. What made Kapo revolutionary was its refusal to portray all victims as saintly martyrs. Instead, it explored how desperate people might commit terrible acts to survive, challenging comfortable moral certainties. The Catholic Church condemned the film as morally corrupting, while Jewish organizations accused Pontecorvo of anti-Semitism despite his own Jewish heritage. The film's most controversial moment shows the protagonist reporting escape plans to Nazi officers. This scene was so disturbing that several Italian theaters stopped screenings after audience members became physically ill. Critics were equally hostile, with influential French reviewer Jacques Rivette declaring the tracking shot of a suicide scene the most disgusting in cinema history. Behind the scenes, actress Susan Strasberg suffered severe depression while filming camp scenes, later revealing she lost 15 pounds and experienced nightmares for years afterward. The production itself faced constant interference from Italian authorities, with police repeatedly interrupting filming based on anonymous complaints. Despite the controversy, Kapo received an Oscar nomination, though Italian officials boycotted the ceremony rather than support the film. Decades later, Stanley Kubrick cited it as direct influence for scenes in Full Metal Jacket, noting, "Pontecorvo understood something essential. Humans aren't simply good or evil. Under extreme pressure, we're capable of both, often simultaneously." Number 8. La Grande Guerra, 1959. Mario Monicelli sparked national outrage by portraying Italian soldiers as reluctant cowards rather than patriotic heroes. This dark comedy about two draft dodgers was the first major film to suggest ordinary Italians weren't enthusiastic about WWII, directly challenging state mythology about national unity during wartime. Veterans associations organized protests outside theaters, with former soldiers burning movie posters and threatening violence against Monicelli. The Italian government initially attempted to block the film from competing at Venice Film Festival, claiming it insulted military honor, but relented after international pressure. What made critics particularly uncomfortable was the film's suggestion that Italy's military incompetence led to unnecessary deaths. One scene, showing officers sending troops into battle without proper equipment, was based on actual military reports that remained classified until the 1950s. Stars Alberto Sordi and Vittorio Gassman received hate mail for portraying anti-heroes rather than traditional military figures. Sordi later revealed he had based his character on his own father's war experiences, saying, "The real insult to veterans is pretending they all died happy for the fatherland, when many were terrified boys who just wanted to live." Despite government disapproval, the film shared the Golden Lion at Venice and became a surprise box office success, grossing over $3 million, proving audiences were ready for more honest war narratives. Film historian Mark Cousins noted, "By using comedy to undermine military mythology, Monticelli accomplished something genuinely revolutionary. He made Italians laugh at their own propaganda." Number 7. Massacre in Rome, 1973. George P. Cosmatos unleashed a political firestorm with this unflinching portrayal of the Ardeatine Massacre, where Nazis executed 335 Italians in retaliation for a partisan attack. The film directly implicated Pope Pius XIII, suggesting he could have prevented the killings but remained silent, a portrayal that led the Vatican to call for a national boycott. Richard Burton, playing Nazi officer Herbert Kappler, received death threats from neo-fascist groups who claimed the film distorted history to demonize both Germans and Italian authorities. The Italian government initially blocked filming at the actual massacre site, forcing the production to recreate the caves elsewhere. The most controversial aspect was showing Italian police actively helping Nazis compile victim lists, contradicting the post-war narrative that Italians universally resisted German occupation. Several scenes depicting police collaboration were cut from initial Italian releases but restored in the international version. Critics were divided along political lines. Left-leaning newspapers praised its historical accuracy, while conservative outlets accused Cosmatos of communist propaganda. One Italian senator even demanded a formal investigation into the film's financing, suggesting it had been funded by anti-Catholic interests. The film's emotional impact was so strong that several survivors of the massacre and victims' families needed medical attention during the premiere screening. Despite attempts to suppress it, Massacre in Rome grossed over $5 million in Europe alone. Historian Robert Katz, whose book inspired the film, was actually convicted of defaming Pope Pius XII's memory in Italian court, a verdict not overturned until 2008, confirming how politically explosive these historical questions remained. Number 6. Everybody Go Home, 1960. Luigi Comencini created uproar with this darkly comic look at the chaos following Italy's 1943 armistice, when soldiers were abandoned without orders as Germans became occupiers overnight. The film portrayed mass confusion rather than heroic resistance, suggesting most Italians were victims of circumstance rather than ideological warriors. Military officials attempted to block filming, claiming the script misrepresented command decisions during a sensitive period. When this failed, they denied use of military equipment, forcing Comencini to repurpose agricultural vehicles as tanks and trucks. What made the film truly explosive was its depiction of ordinary Italians initially celebrating Mussolini's fall, then quickly accommodating German occupation when resistance proved dangerous. One sequence showing civilians changing from fascist to anti-fascist slogans within hours was so controversial that several regional censorship boards demanded cuts. Star Alberto Sordi received threatening letters from veterans groups for portraying a confused soldier rather than a decisive hero. Sordi defended his performance, revealing his character was based on his brother's actual experiences. "This is the truth no one wanted to admit. Our army disintegrated because leaders abandoned them." Critics recognized the film's importance, with French reviewer André Bazin calling it the first honest portrayal of Italy's moral collapse. Despite official disapproval, it won the Fipressi Prize at Venice Film Festival and became a surprise commercial success. Filmmaker Federico Fellini later admitted, "Comencini accomplished something revolutionary. He showed that national humiliation could be both tragic and absurdly funny." This dual perspective was what Italian cinema needed to finally process our wartime trauma. Number 5. The Garden of the Finzi-Continis, 1970. Vittorio De Sica ignited controversy with this haunting portrayal of wealthy Jewish families' gradual destruction under fascism. The film directly implicated ordinary Italians in the Holocaust, contradicting the post-war myth that anti-Semitic persecution was entirely German-imposed, rather than embraced by many Italians. Jewish community leaders initially opposed the project, fearing it would reopen wounds and potentially trigger anti-Semitic reactions. However, De Sica, himself part Jewish, insisted the film was necessary precisely because Italy had never fully confronted its role in the Holocaust. What made the film particularly uncomfortable was showing how upper-class Jews initially believed their wealth would protect them, with the Finzi-Continis literally hiding behind garden walls, while less privileged Jews faced immediate persecution. This class critique angered many who preferred simpler victim narratives. The most controversial scenes showed Italian police enthusiastically arresting Jews without German supervision. These sequences were based on actual historical records, but contradicted official history taught in Italian schools. Several education officials attempted to prevent school screenings, claiming the film was unnecessarily provocative. Despite winning the Oscar for Best Foreign Film, the movie faced distribution problems in smaller Italian cities where theater owners feared protests. Critic Pauline Kael noted its devastating power. "This isn't just about fascism destroying Jews, but about how privilege creates fatal illusions. The garden walls that seem to protect actually become prison walls." De Sica later revealed his personal connection. "My father experienced similar betrayals by people he considered friends." Italy needed to admit that fascism succeeded, partly because good people remained silent behind their own garden walls. Number 4. Malèna, 2000. Giuseppe Tornatore created national controversy with this story of a beautiful war widow ostracized and ultimately assaulted by her own townspeople. The film explicitly connected sexual violence to wider wartime moral collapse, suggesting Italian society turned against itself even without German occupation. Women's groups protested the film, claiming it exploited female suffering through the male gaze and eroticized violence. Several scenes showing Monica Bellucci being attacked were so graphic that Italian television refused to show trailers containing them. What made Malèna particularly provocative was portraying how quickly ordinary Sicilians abandoned social norms during wartime, with former friends becoming predators once external authority disappeared. This contradicted the popular narrative that Italian communities remained solidarily cohesive during wartime. Behind the scenes, Bellucci reported receiving disturbing fan mail from men who missed the film's critique and instead obsessed over her character's objectification. Tornatore defended his approach. The camera deliberately adopts the town's lustful gaze to implicate the viewer in this collective crime. Your discomfort watching Malèna's suffering is precisely the point. Critics were sharply divided. While international reviewers praised its unflinching social commentary, domestic critics accused Tornatore of creating poverty porn that reinforced negative stereotypes about southern Italy. One Italian reviewer famously wrote, "Tornatore has built his career selling Italy's misery to international audiences." Despite the controversy, Malèna earned over $23 million globally. Film scholar Millicent Marcus later observed, What makes the film truly disturbing isn't just depicting violence against women, but suggesting this violence wasn't anomalous. It was the logical conclusion of how wartime Italian society viewed women as either Madonna or whores. Number 3. Life is Beautiful, see 1997. Roberto Benigni shocked the world by setting a comedy in a Nazi concentration camp, creating unprecedented controversy. Holocaust survivors initially condemned the film site Unseen, calling it offensive trivialization of genocide. Jewish organizations worldwide demanded Benigni cancel the project before filming began. What made critics particularly uncomfortable was Benigni's premise: a father convincing his son their imprisonment is an elaborate game with a tank as first prize. Holocaust historians pointed out the impossibility of such deception in actual camps, where children were typically killed immediately upon arrival. The film split critics along national lines. While Italian reviewers praised its life-affirming spirit, international critics were more divided. American reviewer David Denby called it a feel-good Holocaust movie, a conceptual and ethical impossibility. The controversy intensified after Benigni won 3 Oscars, with several Holocaust survivors walking out during his acceptance speech. Behind the scenes, Benigni revealed his father had actually been imprisoned in a German labor camp, and childhood stories of his father's attempts to shield him from these horrors inspired the film. This personal connection failed to convince many critics, with Claude Lanzmann, director of documentary Shoah, declaring, "Laughter and tears around crematoriums? Not possible." Despite the controversy, Life is Beautiful became Italy's highest-grossing film ever at that point, earning $230 million worldwide. Years later, several Holocaust survivors came forward supporting the film, including Marcello Pezzetti, who served as historical consultant. He noted, "The film never shows the worst horrors, maintaining respect while using fable to approach something otherwise almost impossible to portray." Number 2. Paisan, 1946. Roberto Rossellini's 6-part wartime anthology provoked immediate controversy by showing American GIs as deeply flawed liberators rather than heroic saviors. Shot in actual war-damaged locations using non-professional actors, including real soldiers, the film presented an uncomfortable vision of Allied liberation that contradicted both American and Italian preferred narratives. The most explosive segment showed African American soldiers facing segregation while fighting for democracy abroad, a political reality neither country wanted examined. American military officials attempted to block the film's screening at Venice Film Festival, claiming it undermined necessary post-war relations between the countries. What particularly disturbed Italian authorities was the episode showing partisans and Americans failing to communicate effectively, suggesting liberation was marked by mutual incomprehension rather than joyful alliance. Several sequences depicting Italians stealing from American soldiers were cut from early Italian releases for being unnecessarily demeaning. Critics recognized the film's revolutionary approach, with influential reviewer André Bazin declaring it the birth of modern cinema. However, the Italian government considered it problematic enough to discourage its submission for international awards. Rossellini later revealed numerous scenes were based on his first-hand observations during liberation. Americans expected gratitude. Italians expected immediate prosperity, and both were disappointed. This mutual disappointment wasn't being addressed in official narratives. Despite limited distribution, Paisan influenced generations of filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese, who noted, "Rossellini did something truly radical. He showed war without heroes or villains, just confused humans trying to connect across cultural and linguistic divides. It's the most honest war film ever made." Number 1. Salò's Republic, 1969. Bernardo Bertolucci created the most politically explosive Italian war film ever made, with this unflinching look at Mussolini's final puppet state, where fascist true believers conducted revenge killings while awaiting inevitable defeat. The Italian government initially refused to permit filming, forcing production to relocate to Yugoslavia for several crucial sequences. What made the film truly controversial was its suggestion that ordinary Italians enthusiastically participated in atrocities without German direction. One sequence showing townspeople celebrating after partisan executions caused such outrage that neo-fascist groups vandalized theaters screening the film. The most disturbing scenes depicted sexual violence as weapon of political terror, directly connecting fascist ideology to sadism. These sequences were so graphic that the film faced obscenity charges in multiple regions, with several prints confiscated by local authorities despite federal approval. Behind the scenes, star Dominique Sanda received death threats so severe she required police protection. Bertolucci later revealed production documents were stolen from his office, and anonymous callers threatened to kidnap crew members if filming continued. Critics recognized its importance despite the controversy. Influential reviewer Pauline Kael called it the most honest examination of fascism's psychological appeal ever filmed. While Italian newspapers split along political lines in their coverage, the film's release coincided with Italy's Years of Lead, when political violence between communist and neo-fascist groups was intensifying. Several theaters canceled screenings after bomb threats, while others reported violent clashes between opposing protesters outside. Decades later, historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat noted, "Salò's Republic remains explosive because it rejects the comfortable myth that Italian fascism was somehow less evil than Nazism. It forces viewers to confront how political extremism transforms ordinary people into monsters capable of justifying any atrocity." So there you have it, 15 Italian films that dared to challenge comfortable national myths about World War II. They exposed collaboration, moral compromise, and the thin veneer of civilization that collapsed during occupation. Which of these controversial masterpieces do you think went too far? Or should filmmakers push even harder to expose uncomfortable historical truths? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more cinematic deep dives into film history's most explosive chapters.